Hi guys, it's me again, 13 Black Dragon here, and I'm now reading chapter 2 of Getting Back on Your Hooves. So I hope you guys enjoyed the first one. Well, anyway, let's get down right to it, shall we? Chapter 2, Getting Settled. Later, after getting back to Ponyville as discreetly as possible, Twilight led the now cleaned up unicorn mare into the bedroom at the library. You live in a library? Asked Trixie, looking around in confusion. Twilight gave a nod, opening drawers, looking for something. Princess Celestia was nice enough to set me up here. You gave up a room in the royal palace for a library? Asked Trixie, her mind still trying to wrap itself around with the idea that the mayor who had upstaged her was the apprentice of the ruler of the day. She lived she lived in the library there too, said Spike in a slightly deadpan tone as he followed the two mayors into the room. Trixie gave a bewildered look in response. An entire royal palace and you chose the library to stay in? She asked, unable to see why any pony would do that. I take my studies very seriously, replied Twilight, magically floating some extra pillows and blankets out of a drawer to make a bed on the floor. And I love to read, so it seemed like the best place for me, she said, coming down and compulsively making the bed. Trixie can see that, said Trixie, watching Twilight making a guest bed and assuming her study habits must be for the same nature. So Trixie will be sleeping on the floor, she guesses. Nope, I am. Trixie's eyes went wide. Wait, what? She asked, surprise clear in her tone. You're my guest, so I'll take the floor, you take the bed, replied Twilight with a smile. She'd had a guest bed, but it hadn't been seen since Spike's last birthday. I remember that. But Trixie said she wouldn't be taking... It's not pity, Trixie, replied Twilight, giving a frown. It's just part of being a good host. She even made me look up the book on it while you were cleaning up to make sure, said Spike, holding up a book with the title, How to Be a Good Host for Foals. Go figure. Trixie blinked, looking at the book in confusion. But why does a town library even need a book or have a book like that? Same reason it has Slumber 101, all you ever wanted to know about slumber parties, but were afraid to ask. And one of Twilight's favorites, Art of the To-Do List, explained Spike, holding up both books. Oh, I want to read that one again, said Twilight, floating the latter to her. Trixie just stared in the bewilderment for a moment and sighed. She was too tired to come up with a witty remark for this, and besides, a real bed seemed very inviting at the moment. Fine. Now let Trixie ask something. Just what is it that you're studying here in Ponyville that's so important that Princess Celestia personally ordered it? Oh, I'm studying friendship, replied Twilight simply, telekinetically pulling down the covers on the makeshift bed. Friendship? Asked Trixie, giving a confused look. Why would Celestia have you studying friendship? She said, cocking her head in confusion. I'll explain in the morning. It's a long story, replied Twilight, trying to avoid the subject for the time being. Trixie had already had a big shot finding out Twilight was Celestia's pupil, let alone a wielder of an element of harmony. Twilight felt it was best to let her sleep tonight and then tell her in the morning. We'd better get some sleep. There's a lot to do in the morning, she said, yawning for real. She was exhausted after today. Trixie didn't bother arguing and climbed up Twilight's usual bed. In all honesty, she'd not had a decent sleep in a while, let alone had a bed to sleep in. Twilight, you sure this is a good idea? Asked Spike, sitting in his own little bed. I still don't trust her. Don't worry, Spike. Owlicious will keep an eye on her, replied Twilight, though she personally didn't see much reason to worry. After all, they hadn't exactly gotten to actually know Trixie last time. Oh, that reminds me. Trixie, I forgot to introduce you to Owlicious, she called, pointing to the owl, which presently stood on a perch nearby keeping an eye on things. Trixie blinked, looking at the owl. Sorry, which rotated its head to see her. You have a pet owl? Why is Trixie not surprised? She replied, staring at Owlicious as the bird stared at her. Hello there. Who? Trixie. Who? Trixie? Who? Trixie. Who? You stubborn bird. I said my name is Trixie. Who? Trixie snarled angrily, glaring daggers at the owl until Twilight spoke up. Trixie, he's an owl. That's all he can say, she explained with a raised eyebrow. Trixie blushed in embarrassment. Oh, yes. Trixie knew that. Oh, look at the time. Good night, she said quickly, hiding under the covers before another word could be said. Spike chuckled. You shouldn't be laughing, Spike. You did the same thing, reminded Twilight, causing Spike to huff and cover himself up. Good night, Spike, Trixie. Owlicious, she said, using her telekinesis to put out the light and covering herself up. Trixie kept her back to Twilight and sighed sadly. This isn't pity. You're her guest. You're not a useless. You can get along on your own. You can. You'll show those two. You're not a useless failure, she whispered to herself, a tear going down her cheek as she laid down her head and went to sleep. No, no, muttered Twilight, twisting and turning in her makeshift bed. Not my friends. Stop laughing at me. Stop it, she muttered, fear clearing her face as she contorted in her bed. Stop it, she screamed, jumping up awake, looking this way and that, panting heavily. It was morning. Light shined through the window, nothing out of the ordinary. She gave a sigh of relief. It was just a dream. Nightmares? Asked Trixie, rising up in bed and looking down from the loft at her hostess. Twilight gave a sigh and slow nod. Yeah, I've been having them since the Discord incident. Sorry if I woke you. Trixie actually looked sympathetic in response. That, Twilight Sparkle, is something Trixie cannot blame you for, she replied, sounding strangely sincere. Twilight looked up at Trixie, a little surprised by her tone. Really? Trixie nodded. Trixie thinks most of Equestria is having such nightmares now. It's a little surprise one who lived in the epicenter of the disaster would have them, she said, trying not to show her own pain. Trixie, he got to you too, didn't he? Asked Twilight, looking concerned. He got to every pony in Equestria. Is that really such a surprise that Trixie was affected? The show pony replied in a rather harsh tone, trying to avoid the conversation. Well, no. What did he do to you? Asked Twilight, looking concerned for Trixie. She knew what Discord had done to her and her friends. Had he inverted Trixie too? Or drove her mad like every pony else? Trixie turned her head up in a rather snooty manner. Trixie doesn't need your pity. Boy, she says that a lot, doesn't she? She'll keep her problems to herself. Trixie growled in frustration, annoyed with the unicorn's attitude to Tad. Is that your answer to everything? Just when some pony tries to pity Trixie, Trixie replied, getting up, but keeping her face turned away from Twilight as much as possible so she didn't see how upset she was by her memories. Twilight frowned, seeing Trixie trying to keep things bottled up. Sorry. You want to know what he did to me? Trixie looked at her in surprise, but regained her composure quickly as she made her bed. Trixie doesn't care. Say whatever you like, she replied, trying to maintain her image. Nothing. Absolutely nothing to me, said Twilight, looking down with a sad look. Nothing? Then whatever are you having nightmares about? Asked Trixie, looking at Twilight in confusion. Because he didn't have to do anything to me. What he did to every pony else was enough, replied Twilight, lowering her ears in sorrow. He turned my best friends into complete jerks and drove the whole town insane, except me. I had to watch what he did to every pony I care about, completely aware of what was happening, she said, not caring that recounting this fact caused her voice to break in mid-sentence. She hoped it jarred Trixie out of bottling up how she felt about it. Twilight had, and she was 90% sure it'd been one of the reasons she'd had a mental breakdown during the now infamous Smarty Pants incident. Plus, it honestly felt good to get it out herself to some pony else. Sure, her friends knew, but sometimes just talking about it helped. Trixie looked down, looking conflicted. She wasn't used to others sharing something like this with her and how she would react. Trixie sees. Thanks for listening. Anyway, I'm gonna go start breakfast, said Twilight, heading for the door. Nothing is a good term for what he did to Trixie too. Twilight stopped and looked over her shoulder. What? Trixie lowered her head. He made Trixie nothing. Trixie felt and saw things that no pony even knew she existed. Like every pony saw and heard a blank spot where I was. I've never felt so alone, she said, very nearly breaking down in tears before catching it and forcing herself to regain composure. Oh, well, anyway, now you know. Don't pity Trixie for it. Twilight Sparkle, you told her your experience? She told you hers. Simple as that. Trixie frowned. Trixie, are you all right? She asked, deeply concerned. What an awful thing to do to a pony, make them feel like they didn't exist at all. She shivered at the thought, though in a way she knew what it felt like, considering every pony else was too insane to notice she'd existed. Yes, Trixie is fine, replied Trixie, getting back into her normal swagger. Let's just eat breakfast, shall we? She asked, walking by Twilight. Twilight frowned, but remembered how antisocial she used to be before she met her friends. Maybe Trixie was the same way. Getting Trixie to open up like that up at all was a good sign, at least. Come on, Spike, we've got breakfast to make. Big day ahead of us, she called, Spike being grabbed by telekinesis and pulled out of bed with a yell. Oh, 5 more minutes, muttered Spike, trying to keep a hold of his pillow. That was before he burped out a burst of green flame, forming a scroll. A letter from Celestia? Asked Twilight, blinking. What's it say? Spike unrolled it and cleared his throat. Dear my faithful student, due to the significant damage remaining after Discord's reign, we have scheduled a tropical storm to help clear out the environmental damage to some of Equestria so new growth can occur. I thought the elements of Harmony cleared that up. The things he transformed directly, like the chocolate rain, explained Twilight, levitating a burst over to get her mane in order. But a lot of stuff like the dead plants killed by that were left behind and had to be cleaned up manually. I guess there's so much that only a major storm can clear out quickly. It's the same reason they sometimes schedule wildfires and other bad weather, to clear out damaged trees and other types of debris so new stuff can be grown in its place. Spike nodded, then looked back to the letter. The storm should be far from Ponyville, but you will likely receive some of the rains and heavy winds in a few days. Please let Ponyville know and prepare for this. Princess Celestia. P.S. Yesterday, he read, then his eyes widened. What? Asked Twilight, giving Spike a look.